All right, let's jump right in. In today's explainer, we are going to break down a really profound critique of modern consumerism. We'll be exploring the worldview of YouTuber Alexa Saranoja. And what's fascinating here is that she moves way past your standard surface-level conversations about burnout. Instead, she dives deep into how the capitalist system silently and systematically shapes our actual minds. So I really want you to take a second and ask yourself this. Are you actually living your life, or are you just optimizing it? Because let's be honest, how often do you feel trapped in this endless loop of algorithmic feeds and insanely high-pressure societal expectations? In our current digital landscape, Saranoja points out that we are constantly pushed to treat our own lives as data points to be maximized, rather than human experiences meant to be lived. And that brings us to a pretty chilling observation. Saranoja describes modern people as being trapped in this zombie trance. It's a powerful way to frame the debate, right? It perfectly captures how an entire system, which is fundamentally designed to extract our attention, ultimately ends up treating our humanity as mere data. We're just left completely numb, walking around aimlessly. Part 1. The Industrial Identity Compromise, Sanding Down the Self. To really grasp how we fell into this trance, we have to look back at a massive historical shift. This didn't just happen overnight. Back in our early hunter-gatherer days, you were inherently valued just for existing and contributing to your tribe. But then, industrial capitalism came along and completely changed the deal. It essentially demanded that we sand down all our weird quirks, our deep passions, and our messy identities just so we could become manageable, employable cogs in a giant factory machine. We traded our authentic essence for the promise of security. Part 2. The Digital Zombie Trance, Algorithmic Sedation. So, fast forward from the factory floor to today's digital age, and that conditioning has evolved into something far more insidious. Saranoja argues that our current environment turns us into atomized zombies. We literally trade our authentic human presence for performance metrics, clicks, views, audience retention. Think about that very specific numb feeling you get when you're just endlessly scrolling through social media. That infinite swipe induces a deep psychological sedation that totally cuts us off from our own internal agency. Part 3. Head versus heart optimization, the internal dialectic. Now, if we want to break this trance, we have to recognize the massive internal conflict happening inside of us. Saranoja models this beautifully with a story about a metaphorical encounter with a fierce desert sage. On one side, you have the strategic logic of the head. This is exactly what capitalism loves to commodify: metrics, constant optimization, adrenaline, overanalyzing everything. But on the other side, you have the heart. This is your authentic essence. It's about natural flow, quiet stillness, radical reflection. And here's the kicker: it is deeply unmarketable, which means it holds massive disruptive power. In her story, Saranoja talks about trying to force a desert to bloom using sheer mental strategy, just overthinking it. And then this sage metaphorically strikes her right in the chest, knocks her to the ground, and basically demands she get out of her head and into her heart. It's an incredible image because it highlights the radical necessity of abandoning that purely strategic, metric-driven logic if we ever want to reclaim our humanity. Part 4. The Teenage Moment Trap, Arrested Development. Okay, we also need to talk about a very specific psychological trap. Think back to being a teenager, trying on all those different identities. Goth one week, preppy the next, always looking outward for clues on how to act. Well, modern consumer culture actually weaponizes that phase. It purposefully encourages us to endlessly try on these highly curated, trend-chasing identities so that we stay in a permanent state of arrested development. When we are insecure and malleable, we are incredibly easy to market to. Part 5. Reclaiming your creative RAM. Clearing the microstressors. So, how do we actually escape this psychological architecture? It all starts by fiercely protecting our mental bandwidth. Think of your brain as having a limited amount of creative RAM. Those tiny, unhandled microstressors in your life, like walking past the same pile of laundry every single day, or ignoring the fact that you desperately need a glass of water, they silently drain your cognitive capacity. By actively knocking out the small stressors, you stop that systemic energy drain. Remember, the system absolutely relies on you being exhausted and overwhelmed, so you stay sedated. Taking that energy back, that is literally your first act of rebellion. And this is exactly why we have to be ruthlessly intentional about what we consume. If you are constantly feeding on shallow content, you will become shallow. It's that simple. Saranoja makes this profound point about needing to occasionally just jump off the algorithmic cliff into a silent ocean. You have to completely disconnect from the noise, the endless metrics, and the societal expectations, just so you can actually hear your own thoughts again.
Part 6. Embodying Radical Authenticity, the Unshakable Presence.
This brings us to the real core of this whole explainer, stepping completely out of the performance. We hear so much fear about AI and machines replacing us, but that anxiety actually misses the mark. The machine can only replace the highly commodified, optimized, sanded down version of you that the system created in the first place. It cannot generate true humanity. There is absolutely no way it can replace the authentic you. So, what does embodied resistance actually look like? First, you have to stop performing expertise and start genuinely embodying the truth. You need to take those rigid, step-by-step life maps that society handed you and just throw them out. Instead, you've got to lean in and trust your messy, non-rational, heart-led intuition over whatever the algorithm is telling you. And finally, you have to show up with real vulnerability, post and speak the things that inherently scare you. That is how you prioritize natural human flow over a system that demands constant optimization. I want to end by challenging you directly. Take a hard look at your own life right now, your daily habits, your career, your relationships. Where are you tolerating a system that literally shrinks you? Where are you ignoring your own intuition or treating your authentic presence just to survive and get that sweet algorithmic approval? Because at the end of the day, you will never out-optimize a machine. It's a game you can't win. But by trusting your own disruptive truth, you absolutely reclaim your humanity. It's time to step out of your head, get back into your heart, and leave that zombie trance behind for good. So I'll leave you with this. What is one single thing in your life that you can stop optimizing today so you can actually start living?
Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded subway car.
Okay.
You are totally surrounded by people, and you just start clapping your hands, like really loudly.
Just completely out of nowhere.
Right out of nowhere.
Yeah.
You start screaming at the top of your lungs. You're waving your arms around, frantically trying to get anyone's attention, and not a single person even blinks.
That is deeply unsettling.
Right. They just stare straight ahead, eyes totally glazed over, and they just keep shuffling forward in this complete eerie silence.
Yeah, that sounds like something straight out of a horror movie.
It really does.
Yeah.
But that is the exact nightmare vision used by YouTuber and creator Alexa Saranoja to describe the modern world.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the really terrifying part is when you take a step back and actually look at how we navigate our daily lives, like mindlessly scrolling, obsessively checking our metrics, just operating on this low hum of perpetual exhaustion. That subway car doesn't even feel like a nightmare.
It just feels like a Tuesday afternoon.
Exactly. It's just normal now. We are looking at this diagnostic landscape of modern burnout that is just incredibly murky.
Because it's not obvious.
Right. We aren't talking about, a broken bone where you can point to an x-ray and say, there is the fracture.
It's much more insidious than that.
Exactly. We are talking about a society that feels completely atomized, right? Just trapped in this endless loop of algorithmic feeds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the core question we are exploring in today's deep dive is this. Do you, the listener, feel like you are constantly trading your authentic human presence for meaningless performance metrics just to survive in today's world?
That is such a heavy question, but it's so necessary because it forces us to look beyond, individual failing.
Right. It's not just a you problem.
Exactly. We have to examine the actual structure we live within. The ailment we are talking about here isn't a lack of personal resilience. It's a fractured sense of self.
A fracture that the system actually needs.
Yes. It is engineered by a system that requires that fracture to function. And Saranoja's work provides a really fascinating lens for this.
Because we have this collection of her videos and writings we're looking at today.
Right. And while she often speaks directly to the creator economy, her underlying critique is deeply philosophical. It's psychological.
We should clarify we are completely filtering out all the generic business advice today.
Oh, for sure. We are strictly analyzing her critique of modern capitalism and consumerism. She doesn't view our current economic and digital landscape merely as a marketplace.
How does she view it then?
She views it as an architecture, specifically a psychological architecture that actively induces numbness.
So the system doesn't just want you buying things. It wants you completely sedated while you do it.
That is the core dialectic we have to grapple with today. The modern capitalist and consumerist system wants you to be a predictable, malleable data point.
Because predictable is profitable.
Precisely. It relies entirely on your predictability to generate revenue. If your behavior can be mapped, it can be monetized. Right? But your true power, your actual leverage in this world, lies in becoming an unshakable, authentic force that completely defies those metrics.
So there's this massive tension.
Exactly. The tension between those two states, being a predictable data point versus an unpredictable human, that is where all of our modern exhaustion stems from.
Well, let's outline the roadmap for this deep dive, because we were covering a lot of ground today.
Yeah, we really are.
We are going to start by deconstructing this zombie trance and what she calls the battle of head versus heart.
Right, the logic versus the essence.
Exactly. Then we'll look at how to escape the teenage moment trap and how we can actually reclaim our mental bandwidth. And finally, we'll explore radical embodiment as the ultimate anti-algorithm rebellion.
It's a huge journey.
It is. So let's jump right back into that terrifying vision of the subway car, which she actually calls the zombie trance.
It's such a striking visualization of being a cog in this attention extraction machine.
It really is. She describes this sea of people with empty eyes.
Yeah.
They are walking aimlessly with no purpose or direction.
And no matter how loud she screams, they don't wake up.
Zero response. They just keep shuffling.
Yeah.
This is her central metaphor for the modern consumer trapped in the digital capitalist loop.
And honestly, it hits incredibly close to home.
Oh, totally. Just look around any waiting room.
Uh-huh.
Or, observe your own behavior on the couch at night.
The classic dual screening.
Yes. You have a television show on that you barely care about, and you are infinitely scrolling on your phone at the same time.
The crucial mechanism to understand here is that this sedation is not an accident.
Wait, really? It's not just a side effect?
No, not at all. We often talk about digital burnout as if it's an unfortunate byproduct of a system that's failing, right? Like pollution from a factory.
Like it's a mistake we need to fix.
Right, but it's not. This trance is an architectural feature of a system that is working exactly as it was designed to work.
Wow. Okay, break that down for us.
So, the digital landscape extracts our daily attention by reducing genuine human interactions to performance metrics.
Like clicks and views.
Exactly. Clicks, views, retention rates, conversion percentages. And in the process of optimizing human behavior to generate those specific metrics, we are inherently dehumanized.
Because the machine doesn't see a human.
It only sees data points fueling an algorithmic machine. Think about it. Your entire existence, how you communicate with your friends, how you express joy, how you seek out information, it's all mediated by a system designed strictly to extract value from your attention.
So slipping into a trance is actually just a natural response to that.
It's a biological survival mechanism. The trance protects you against the sheer overwhelming scale of the extraction that is happening to you every single day.
Okay, but I have to push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
How do we reconcile that feeling of extraction with the core promise of these technologies? Because the narrative we've been sold for, 20 years now, is that this digital world is the ultimate tool for human connection.
That's certainly the marketing pitch.
Right. We have the ability to talk to anyone, anywhere, instantly. You can find niche communities online that you could never find in your physical town.
Absolutely true.
So if we are so hyper-connected, and if these platforms are supposedly built on social networking, how does that mechanically translate into us being zombies?
That right there is the defining paradox of our era, and Saranoja identifies it brilliantly.
Okay, what's her take?
The system offers hyperconnectivity, sure, but what it actually delivers is atomized alienation.
Atomized alienation. Okay, that sounds a bit like a sociology thesis. Can you break down how that actually works in practice?
Yeah, let's look at the mechanics of algorithmic mediation. So, yes, you can find a niche community.
Right, like a group for, vintage watch collectors.
Exactly. But the platform mediating that community doesn't actually care about your sense of belonging.
It just cares about your time on site.
Precisely.
Yeah.
To maximize that time, it actively forces you to optimize your behavior. It trains you to format your thoughts in a way that generates engagement.
So you aren't just sharing a genuine moment of your life anymore.
No, you are crafting a post to fit a trending format. You're using specific trending audio. You're editing out the natural pauses in your speech.
You're performing.
Yes. By forcing us to optimize our behavior for the algorithm, the platform strips away the natural friction of real humanity.
And that leaves us in the trance.
It leaves us in a state where we just consume inputs and output responses without actually processing the emotional weight of what we are doing. You are connected to the network, yeah, but you are entirely disconnected from yourself.
And from genuine human resonance.
Exactly. The current running through the network isn't human emotion anymore, it's engagement data.
So we are basically just playing a character of ourselves. We're performing our lives rather than living them because the performance is the only thing the machine actually understands.
That is perfectly stated.
And there's a point she makes about this that I found incredibly unsettling, specifically regarding the value of information.
Oh, the AI aspect.
Yeah. We've spent the last decade acting as if information is the most valuable commodity on Earth. But she notes that the value of pure information has essentially collapsed.
It really has. Because artificial intelligence has entirely automated the distribution of pure data.
Right. If you want a 5-step guide to fixing your sink, you don't need to read a dense article anymore.
Or sit through a 12-minute video with a sponsored intro and a life story.
Exactly. AI just synthesizes it and delivers it to you in 10 seconds.
The capitalist machine has automated pure data. It is faster, it costs essentially nothing, and it is instantly accessible.
Which leaves humanity in this incredibly precarious position.
How so?
Well, the machine has mastered data, yet we are still running around trying to act like machines to keep up with it.
Oh, that's such a good point.
We are trying to out-optimize algorithms at their own game. And it's a fight we fundamentally cannot win, right? You cannot outcompute a computer.
You really can't.
We are driving ourselves into the ground, trying to be the most efficient, data-driven versions of ourselves, while the actual computers are just sitting there doing it infinitely better.
Which leads directly to the core internal conflict she talks about.
Let's get into that.
If the system is actively extracting our humanity and demanding that we act like efficient data processors, it means it is attacking a very specific part of our psychology.
It's more than just physical exhaustion from, working long hours.
Much more. This is a profound internal battle between our logic and our essence. Saranoja frames this as the battle of head versus heart.
The head versus the heart.
Yeah, and it requires us to really look at how modern society commodifies our actual thought processes.
To illustrate this, she shares a deeply visceral story from one of her shamanic journeys.
This story is wild.
It really is. In this vision, she is standing on a beach and she encounters this fierce ancient sage.
Right.
She tries to stand up, and this sage just violently slams her in the chest, pushing her right back down into the sand.
And she tries to get up again, right?
Yeah, she tries to get up again, and again the sage strikes her right in the chest. And he commands her, "Get out of your head and into your heart. Your heart is where the power is, not here."
It's such a powerful image.
And to ground that in reality, think about it. That physical strike to the chest feels remarkably like the sensation of a panic attack.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, it's 11 p.m., you are staring at a spreadsheet, and you suddenly realize you haven't spoken a meaningful word to your spouse in 3 days. It's like your body physically trying to stop the momentum of your over-analytical mind.
It is a profound dialectical debate. The head represents strategic optimization, right?
Okay.
And the heart represents authentic essence. Capitalism operates almost entirely in the domain of the head.
Because the head produces things the system understands.
Exactly. Things that can easily commodify, measure, and scale.
Yeah.
The head is where you strategize. It's where you optimize your daily schedule, where you analyze performance metrics.
Or you calculate the ROI on your weekend hobbies.
Yes. The head speaks the language of the algorithm fluently. And in our society, we relentlessly applaud people who live exclusively in their heads.
We call them rational.
We call them driven and successful.
But operating purely in the head reduces life to a giant game of chess.
That's a great way to put it.
Every move is calculated, risks are constantly mitigated, and you are constantly trying to control the board. But the problem is that true human nature is not a finite game of chess.
No, it's not.
It is more like jazz. And you simply cannot put a metric on jazz.
Let's examine why that analogy works on a mechanical level, because it's brilliant. Algorithms can solve chess because chess is a finite game.
Right, it has spatial boundaries and set rules.
Exactly. An algorithm can calculate every possible permutation and just determine the most statistically viable path to victory. But jazz is generative.
It's spontaneous.
The next note in a jazz performance isn't dictated by some mathematical formula. It's dictated by the emotional resonance in the room at that exact moment.
It requires feeling it.
It requires reading a slight shift in the drummer's breathing or sensing the tension in the audience. It pulls from a well of lived human experience.
And a machine physically cannot read those data points.
Because they aren't data. They are essence. The heart represents that unmarketable, disruptive power.
The things about you that can't be put into a spreadsheet.
Exactly. It encompasses the parts of you that cannot be optimized, that cannot be cleanly categorized in a database, and crucially, that cannot be replicated by AI.
Because the heart is erratic, it's deeply emotional, and it's driven by intuition rather than efficiency.
And Saranoja realized this firsthand. She notes that when she led with her head, when she was stuck analyzing those metrics and playing that strategic chess game of the digital world, her soul felt entirely hollowed out.
Even though on paper she was winning the game.
Oh, on paper, her business was thriving. She was successful by literally every metric the system provided. But internally, she realized she was one of those zombies shuffling on the subway car.
Wow. And going back to that vision of the beach, she initially tries to wake those zombies up using logic, right?
Right, she uses her head.
She claps, she yells, she says, hey, wake up. She is using the head to solve a problem that was created by the head.
Then what happens?
It does absolutely nothing. The zombies keep walking. It is only when she remembers the sage striking her in the chest that she changes her approach entirely.
She drops into the heart.
She puts her hands over her heart, she taps into that raw essence, and she begins to sing. She sings from her soul, she's crying, expressing this full, messy spectrum of human emotion.
And that's what worked.
That raw emotional resonance is what finally breaks the trance and wakes them up.
The mechanism there is so crucial for us to understand. Authentic emotion disrupts the trance because it introduces a variable the algorithm fundamentally cannot process.
The algorithm knows how to handle outrage.
Oh, it loves outrage. It handles agreement, it handles predictable consumer desires. But it is not designed to process pure, uncommodified human vulnerability.
It just doesn't compute.
Exactly. But this brings us to a massive psychological hurdle we have to face.
Which is?
If this authentic essence, this heart, is so undeniably powerful and magnetic, why do we abandon it so easily?
That's a great question.
Why, when faced with a challenge, do we instinctively default right back to the spreadsheets, the metrics, and the strategic logic of the head?
I think because operating in the heart is terrifying.
It's vulnerable.
It requires relinquishing control. When you are in your head, you feel like you are driving the car.
Even if you're driving off a cliff.
Right. You feel safe because you have a plan, even if the plan is slowly killing you.
But it goes deeper than just personal fear. We abandon the heart because the socioeconomic system actively and aggressively encourages a state of perpetual insecurity.
Okay, unpack that.
The system cannot control the heart.
Yeah.
If you are deeply rooted in your authentic self, you are self-sustaining.
You don't need a quick fix.
You don't need to buy the next product to feel whole. You don't need to infinitely scroll for validation. You are not a reliable consumer.
Ah, I see.
Therefore, the architecture of consumerism is designed to sever that connection to the heart and keep you anxiously operating in the head, always looking outside yourself for the answers.
Which brings us to how the system actually accomplishes this on a day-to-day psychological level.
Yes, the teenage moment trap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Saranoja introduces this concept, and it is so spot on. When you observe a teenager, you're basically watching someone actively trying to construct an identity.
It's a lot of trial and error.
A lot.
Yeah.
One week, they're dressing in all black, listening to heavy metal.
And the next week.
Suddenly, they're incredibly invested in a specific sport. They're wearing the gear, adopting the slang. They're constantly looking outward at their peers, at influencers, at cultural trends for clues on who they are supposed to be.
They're seeking external validation to confirm their internal sense of self.
Exactly.
Now, it is a perfectly developmentally appropriate phase for a 14-year-old. But Saranoja's critique is that modern consumer culture fundamentally relies on keeping the adult population permanently trapped in this exact state of arrested development.
So the entire economy is basically built on keeping us as perpetual teenagers, nervously checking to see if we're sitting at the cool kids' table.
Mechanically speaking, yes. A malleable identity is the single most profitable state a human being can exist in.
Because they'll buy whatever you tell them will fix them.
Exactly. If you are constantly looking outward for permission and validation, like checking the analytics to see if your thought was good,
Or buying the latest aesthetic trend to signal your status.
or mimicking the morning routine of a billionaire so you can feel ambitious, you just remain clay in the hands of the market.
You're totally moldable.
A rooted, secure adult identity doesn't need to consume rapidly to feel confident. But a malleable teenage identity is always desperately searching for the next external fix to soothe its internal uncertainty.
I get that, but let me challenge this for a second, because I can hear the listener raising an eyebrow here.
Let's hear it.
They might be thinking, wait, isn't continuous self-improvement and trying new things a good thing? Like, even as adults, we change careers, we take up new hobbies, we travel and adopt new perspectives.
Sure.
So how is natural human curiosity a systemic trap? It sounds like you were saying we should just pick one personality at age 25 and stubbornly stick to it forever.
I'm glad you brought that up. The distinction lies in the underlying motivation.
Okay.
The trap isn't the act of exploring or evolving. Exploration driven by genuine internal curiosity is incredibly healthy.
So what's the trap?
The trap is staying in a state of flux out of fear. It is the inability to ever land on who you actually are because the system is constantly moving the goalposts of what is considered acceptable, successful, or attractive.
Oh, I see. It's the difference between taking a pottery class because you genuinely want to feel clay in your hands versus taking a pottery class because you saw an influencer do it and you think posting photos of the ceramics will make you look grounded and artistic to your followers.
Precisely. In that second scenario, your identity is completely outsourced to the audience's reaction. Capitalism profits immensely by keeping you in this messy middle.
The permanent middle.
Right. It works around the clock to convince you that your true, realized self isn't something you inherently possess. Instead, it is framed as a destination you have to purchase, perform, or optimize your way toward.
It's always just out of reach.
The system thrives only when you inherently believe that you aren't enough yet. The word yet is basically the engine of modern consumerism.
And when you look at how this plays out digitally, Saranoja points out that people tend to subscribe to or buy from creators and brands that reflect who they secretly want to be.
Yes.
The system continuously feeds us safe content and encourages us to adopt safe identities.
It wants us sanded down.
Sanded down, palatable, and easily categorized. Because a safe identity doesn't challenge anyone. A safe identity creates a smooth, frictionless transaction.
But that friction is where humanity actually lives.
Right.
Saranoja observes that while a safe identity facilitates a transaction, a true, unshakable identity creates a genuine relationship. And the algorithm has zero control over a genuine relationship.
Because it's not based on trends.
Exactly. If you are showing up radically as yourself with all your specific flaws and unique perspectives, the people who connect with that are going to stick with you regardless of what the trending format is or what the platform's algorithm dictates that week.
But let's be honest about the cost of this. Stepping into that unshakable identity, refusing to play the game of external validation. It requires immense energy.
It's exhausting.
It requires a level of mental fortitude that most of us simply do not have at the end of a long week. Being constantly worried about validation and constantly performing this safe identity at work and online is fundamentally draining.
Which is the most insidious part of the architecture, actually.
How do you mean?
We need to recognize that this exhaustion is not a side effect of a demanding world. It is a feature of the system.
Wait, the system wants us tired.
The systemic draining of our mental bandwidth is exactly what keeps us compliant.
The cognitive cost of constant self-monitoring is staggering when you think about it. And Saranoja has a story to illustrate this that is so mundane, yet so incredibly resonant.
The underwear story.
Yes, the story of her 10-year-old underwear. She talks about how she would meticulously prioritize the needs of her children.
Which is what society tells mothers to do.
Exactly. If they outgrew their clothes by a fraction of an inch, she instantly replaced them. She was generating significant revenue in her business, providing absolute abundance for everyone around her.
But what about her?
That's the thing. She was walking around every single day wearing aging, wholly, worn-out 10-year-old underwear. She was hoarding the worn-out items for herself while pouring all her resources outward.
It is such a brilliant, grounded example of a very high-level psychological concept.
Yeah.
If we analyze the mechanism here, it perfectly illustrates the concept of creative RAM.
Like the random access memory in a computer.
Yes.
Which basically dictates how many programs you can run simultaneously before the system just freezes.
Exactly. Our culture of overfunctioning, which is deeply intertwined with capitalist logic, has conditioned us to believe that self-sacrifice is synonymous with strength and virtue.
Well, for sure. We socially reward the mother who puts everyone else first to her own physical detriment.
We praise the employee who works through lunch and answers emails at midnight.
We call them dedicated.
But mechanically, what we are doing is allowing 1,000 small stressors to accumulate, ignoring our basic physical comfort, leaving administrative microtasks on hold, tolerating low-level physical pain we could easily treat. These things do not disappear just because we ignore them.
They just sit there.
They quietly run in the background of our subconscious, drawing continuous power from our cognitive reserves.
Instead of the old 50 browser tabs analogy, think about it like driving a car with the emergency brake slightly engaged.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
The car is still moving forward. You are
Right.
still getting to work. You are still paying your bills, still technically functioning. But the engine is running insanely hot. You are burning through fuel at twice the normal rate. And beneath the surface, the brake pads are just disintegrating.
Exactly. Every time she put on that worn-out clothing, it wasn't just a minor inconvenience.
It was a signal.
On a subconscious neurological level, it was a microstressor, sending a subtle but continuous signal to her brain that her basic needs were secondary.
And this elevates from a personal failing to a systemic critique.
Yeah.
When you realize that modern consumerism actually requires your RAM to be maxed out on survival and microstressors.
Yes.
Walk us through that causality, though. Why does the system actively benefit from our chronic exhaustion?
Consider the neuroscience of decision fatigue and allostatic load.
Yeah.
When your cognitive capacity is entirely consumed by just navigating the day, managing your low-level anxieties, and seeking that baseline level of external validation just to feel safe.
Just to feel okay.
Your prefrontal cortex, which is the area of the brain responsible for complex problem-solving and critical thinking, is essentially throttled.
It's tapped out.
You literally do not have the neurological bandwidth to rebel, to innovate, or to deeply question the structure of your reality. You can only conform.
Because it's easier.
When you are exhausted, you default to the path of least resistance. And the path of least resistance is always the path the system has pre-paved for you.
Consume the convenient product, perform the expected behavior, optimize your output.
Systemic exhaustion guarantees compliance.
That is a staggering realization.
Yeah.
If you are exhausted, you cannot rebel. You can only conform.
It's chilling.
So when Saranoja talks about clearing out these microstressors, like finally buying the new clothes, fixing the leaky faucet, finishing the lingering task, she isn't talking about treating yourself.
Not at all.
She's talking about an act of profound self-reclamation. Minimizing those small stressors instantly frees up cognitive energy. It's an act of telling your subconscious, I am worthy of functioning at full capacity.
Because you cannot step into an unshakable, authentic power if your baseline operating system is anchored by chronic self-neglect. Reclaiming your creative RAM is the absolute non-negotiable prerequisite for escaping the zombie trance.
You have to stop the bleeding first.
You have to.
Okay, so let's walk down this path. Let's say a listener does this. They release the emergency brake, they clear the microstressors, they stop functioning purely on the exhausting extractive logic of the machine.
Okay, they've cleared the space.
Now they have this cleared mental bandwidth. What do they actually do with it? Because the traditional capitalist advice at this point is, great, your head is clear. Now map out a 5-year plan. Set your key performance indicators. Optimize your trajectory and maximize this new energy.
The standard grind set advice.
Exactly. But Saranoja offers an alternative that completely shatters that framework, which she discovered during another shamanic journey.
Yes, this brings us to her second encounter with the desert sage, and this incredibly potent concept of intuitive incrementality.
So in the second vision, she meets the exact same sage, but they are no longer on the beach.
Where are they?
They are in a harsh, unbearable desert. It is scorching, dry, just miserable. The sage looks at her and gives a very simple command. Create a lush forest.
Just like that.
Just like that. So operating from her head, she tries to use her mind to force the environment to change.
She tries to logic her way out of it.
Exactly. She concentrates intensely, trying to logically deduce a way to make it rain. She tries to strategically force a single blade of grass to grow through sheer mental effort.
And let me guess.
Absolutely nothing happens. The sage just observes her struggling and says, you are stuck in your head.
It is the ultimate diagnosis of how we approach problem solving in the modern world. We genuinely believe that if we just apply enough mental force, we can bend reality to our will.
Right. And she gets incredibly frustrated. But finally, she just gives up on the strategy. She stops trying to force the outcome.
She surrenders to it.
She walks over, sits down on a boulder next to the sage, completely relaxes her physical body, and decides to just be present in the moment.
Then what happens?
Instantaneously, without any strategic effort at all, the dry desert environment around them blooms into a vibrant, lush, tropical forest.
To decode this, we really have to look at how deeply it subverts our conditioned expectations of success.
Oh, completely.
Modern consumerism and digital capitalism demand what philosophers sometimes call a totalizing map. We are conditioned to believe we need the 5-year plan, the detailed quarterly goals, the constant optimization of every waking hour.
If you don't have a plan, you're failing.
Right. It is the belief that success requires forcing reality to bend to our strategic will through sheer analytical effort and relentless output.
It is the absolute core of the modern grind set mentality. If I just push harder, if I just optimize my morning routine with ice baths and journaling, I can force this desert to bloom.
But Saranoja is arguing that abandoning this totalizing map and instead trusting your non-rational, heart-led intuition is the ultimate rebellion against the algorithmic mindset.
I have to interject here because this is where the philosophy meets the harsh reality of the listener's daily life.
Okay, play devil's advocate.
Let's play this out. The listener's thinking, okay, the secret to surviving capitalism and finding my authentic self is just sitting on a rock and doing nothing, giving up on my strategy.
I can see how it sounds like that.
If I just be present at my desk at my corporate accounting firm, I am not going to manifest a lush forest. I am going to get fired. This sounds like a luxury that only a successful, self-employed entrepreneur can afford. How does an average person with a mortgage and a boss actually apply this?
That is the most important pushback to address.
Yeah.
Because our culture automatically equates stillness with laziness or passivity.
Right.
But the concept here is not passive. It is what we can call intuitive incrementality.
Intuitive incrementality.
Yes. It is not about abandoning output or stopping your work. It is about shifting the internal locus of execution.
Shift the internal locus of execution. Explain that mechanism.
Intuitive incrementality means recognizing that you fundamentally cannot out-optimize a system that is inherently designed to treat your humanity as a data point.
It's a rigged game.
Exactly. The harder you try to force the system to yield to your strategic will, the harder you try to manipulate the algorithm or force a rigid 5-year career path, regardless of how you actually feel, the more entangled you become in the machine's logic.
You burn out trying to make it rain with your mind.
Yes. Intuitive incrementality is the understanding that true creation and true sustainability happens in a state of flow, not a state of force.
Flow over force.
It is the difference between forcing a spreadsheet to yield a specific predetermined narrative, because that's what the 5-year plan dictates, versus looking at the data, feeling the reality of the situation, and letting the truth dictate the next immediate step.
So you aren't sitting on the rock doing nothing. You are stopping the frantic, useless mental flailing so you can actually perceive the next correct move.
Exactly. When you stop strategizing solely to please the external system, you stop trying to manufacture the outcome and begin working with your natural psychological architecture rather than against it.
You take the next intuitive step.
And then the next. You don't need the entire 5-year map laid out in advance because the map is an illusion anyway. The terrain is going to change.
It always does.
By moving incrementally from a place of grounded authenticity, you allow the forest to bloom around you organically. You are still moving, you're still working, but the fuel source is internal alignment, not external anxiety.
She gives a very tangible, real-world example of this struggle, too. She talks about intentionally going for a walk in the woods to relax and clear her head.
A classic unplugging attempt.
Right, but she found she physically couldn't stop her mind from looping over business metrics, analyzing client calls, worrying about what she needed to post next to maintain her engagement.
Because the mind was still spinning.
Her physical body was in a serene forest, but mentally, her head was still trapped in the desert, furiously trying to force the grass to grow.
Her creative RAM was completely hijacked by the strategic demands of the head.
Exactly.
The environment didn't even matter because the internal state was still locked in survival mode.
And the peace only returned when she consciously stepped out of the performance of being the optimized businesswoman and forced herself to step into pure physical presence.
She had to ground herself.
She had to feel her feet on the dirt. She had to just be on a walk.
This state of presence, this ability to actually inhabit your life rather than manage it, requires a radically different way of existing in the world.
It's a huge shift.
It requires a complete departure from the malleable, validation-seeking teenager and the exhausted, optimizing zombie.
Which brings us to the final, unifying concept of this entire exploration. How do we actually anchor ourselves in that unshakable presence when the entire world is screaming at us to perform?
It's the ultimate challenge.
And to find the answer, we look to the concept of radical embodiment, which Saranoja anchors in what she calls the Viking principle.
This is a fascinating cultural contrast.
It really is. She frequently references her Finnish husband, whom she affectionately calls the Viking, and the broader cultural principles she absorbed while living in Finland.
Now, we should note, it is important to view this not as a, geographical absolute or a stereotype,
Right.
but as a psychological contrast to the hyper-performativity of Western and particularly Silicon Valley digital culture.
Right. It's not about everyone in Finland being an emotionless Viking. It's about the cultural value placed on unvarnished authenticity.
Yes.
In the environment she describes, there is a stark rejection of fakeness. There's no performative smiling if you aren't actually happy.
No networking disguised as friendship.
Exactly. It's about embracing the reality of community over cutthroat, individualized competition, and being unapologetically, bluntly real.
If we synthesize this principle into our discussion, it perfectly encapsulates the overarching theme, the transition from a shifting, trend-chasing teenage identity to an unshakable, embodied presence.
It's the antidote to the algorithm.
It is. The capitalist algorithmic architecture demands that you continuously perform your expertise. It wants the perfectly curated script, the flawless lighting, the highly optimized outputs that fit neatly into a timeline.
It wants perfection.
Because the performance of perfection is easily digestible and highly monetizable.
But true magnetism, true safety in an increasingly chaotic world, and true power are not found in the performance.
Where are they found?
They are found in the radical act of embodiment.
Let's define radical embodiment in this context. What does that actually mean, practically?
If you are listening to this, trying to figure out how to survive the daily grind, it means this. You cannot beat the algorithm at its own game.
You just can't.
You will never be faster, more optimized, or more efficient than the machine. If you try, you will just end up a zombie on that subway car.
Exhausted and alienated.
The only way to win is to stop playing what Saranoja calls the creator game, the exhausting hustle of chasing views, metrics, and external validation.
And start playing what?
Start playing the authority game of your own life. It's about owning exactly who you are, without the digital or professional filters.
It is a profound shift in orientation. When you stop engineering your life, your work, or your art for attention and start generating it from a place of deep intention, you transform into a larger-than-life force.
You stop being clay.
You cease to be the malleable clay looking for permission to exist. You cease to be the exhausted data point feeding the machine. You become a fixed point of gravity, an authority.
And there is a looming technological reality that makes this shift not just philosophical, but imperative for survival.
You mean AI?
AI is the great filter. Saranoja points out something incredibly empowering about our anxiety regarding artificial intelligence.
Oh, this is such a good point.
Yes, AI is coming for jobs. It's coming for content. But it is coming for the version of you that was never really you in the first place. AI can easily replicate the sanded down, corporate-approved, highly optimized, jargon-filled version of you because that version of you was already acting like a machine.
That is the ultimate irony of our time. We spent 2 decades training ourselves to communicate like computers so the algorithm would reward us, and now actual computers are here to replace that specific behavior.
It's almost poetic.
But what AI physically cannot replicate is human, flawed, beautiful embodiment.
It cannot replicate the jazz.
No, it cannot synthesize the scars you've earned, the
Yeah.
highly specific, idiosyncratic way you view the world based on your lived physical experience, or the raw emotional resonance of your authentic voice.
Your messy humanity is your ultimate defense mechanism against an automated world.
It is the only moat that cannot be breached by superior processing power.
Wow. So let's trace the arc of this incredible philosophical journey we've been on today.
It's been quite a ride.
We started by looking at the terrifying reality of the zombie trance, that algorithmic sedation that completely numbs us to our own lives. And we explored how to break that trance by shifting our reliance from the strategizing, commodifiable logic of the head to the disruptive, unmarketable, intuitive power of the heart.
We examine the systemic traps deliberately designed to keep us exhausted and insecure.
Like the teenage moment.
Yes, we saw how escaping the teenage moment of constant external validation is vital. We discussed the neurological necessity of clearing out the microstressors that drain our creative RAM.
Recognizing that treating our basic needs as primary is an act of defiance against a system that wants us too tired to rebel.
And finally, we learn from the desert sage and the Viking principle that abandoning forced optimization in favor of intuitive incrementality and radical embodiment is the ultimate rebellion.
You stop performing the optimized version of yourself, and you start actually existing in your messy, unshakable truth.
As we wrap up this exploration, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought.
Lay it on us.
We have spent this time analyzing how this psychological architecture traps us individually, right? And we focused on the mechanics of personal rebellion. But what happens if this scales?
Oh, wow.
What happens if a critical mass of people successfully log off from this algorithmic validation loop? If millions of us reclaim our creative RAM and simply refuse to perform for the digital extraction economy, that creates a massive surplus of authentic human energy.
Energy that was previously just being drained into a feed.
Exactly. So where does it go? How might that reclaimed energy physically reshape our local communities and neighborhoods?
That is a staggering thought. I mean, if we are pouring all of our cognitive bandwidth and emotional resonance into a glowing rectangle, does it go into local politics? Does it go into physical community building, into art, into actual face-to-face connection?
Could the individual rebellion of the heart, this radical embodiment, be the foundational bedrock for an entirely new post-consumerist physical world? A world built on the friction of actual human connection rather than the seamless extraction of our attention. It's a profound possibility to consider as you navigate the week ahead.
It is an incredible vision to hold on to. If you just stop trying to endlessly read that murky X-ray of algorithmic burnout and instead, just step outside, release the emergency brake, and feel the sun on our actual physical skin.
Just be present.
Exactly. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it inspired you to step out of the performance, embrace your messy humanity, and start embodying your unshakable truth today. Catch you next time.